I'm just here to talk to you about your gear and some things that you as a jumper, especially if you pack for yourself, you're the person that sees your gear the most, and some stuff that you can look out for on your own gear and that you can look out for on your friends that you're jumping with. So, I mean, the first thing I would say that we're going to talk about is closing loops. That is, it's super common to need to replace your closing loop. We say you want to replace that after 10% wear. That doesn't mean 10% left. If you're looking at your closing loop and you're like, man, that looks terrible, please change it. It's a $2 piece of string. The reason it's so important is that it's what's keeping your parachute in until you want it out. And if you're, let's say you're filming someone, you're on the camera step and that breaks, now we have an open parachute on the outside of the airplane. That's dangerous. If you're in a skydive and someone hits you and your closing loop breaks, that's dangerous. And you want to make sure when you change it that it's the correct length for your rig. You can check your owner's manual because different rigs have different recommendations for how the closing loop should be. This is a vector, so you can see, on this rig you can see both grommets. That's normal for a vector, that's how the closing loop on this rig goes. If you had a javelin and it looked like this, your closing loop would be way too long. So that's definitely something that you want to keep an eye on. Change it if it's looking worn out. If you're jumping with someone and you do a gear check and you notice their closing loop is worn out, fix it before the skydive. That way you're all safer on the skydive. Don't go free flying and be like, oh, we'll fix it when we land. No, fix it before the skydive. The other thing you can check on your gear and your friend's gear that's really important that wears out sometimes is your BOC. Your BOC is spandex and elastic, so after a couple hundred jumps, that elastic gets stretched out. And it still looks like a BOC, but it's not very secure. So that's something that, you know, when you get your reserve repacked, if you've got a couple hundred jumps on your rig, you may need to get your BOC replaced. And this one is in pretty good shape. You can see that this elastic is still stretchy, but if this was all stretched out and you could see like wavy and the elastic's starting to break, you want to get that changed. It's usually something that maybe every 500 jumps, 600 jumps, but it depends a little bit on how you pack your pilot chute, how you treat your rig. It might wear out sooner if you're folding your pilot chute really bulky, things like that. And again, that's something, if you see that your friend's BOC looks terrible, let them know, because sometimes when we're looking at our own gear, it gets a little bit worse every time we use it. We don't really notice, kind of like how kids grow up and you're like, you see them every day, you don't think they've grown that much, and then you don't see them for 6 months and you're like, whoa, that happens with the wear and tear in our gear. Like, we're packing our rig every day and we're like, it's not that bad, but you know, your friend might not notice that his gear is worn out. The other thing that we see, I've noticed it a lot lately, a lot of you guys lose your elastic keepers and you put rubber bands on your harness. The thing about doing that is that it wears out your harness webbing because the rubber bands are sticky. They're made of rubber, it's sticky, and as you're sliding it back and forth across your chest strap, you're breaking the fibers of your webbing. Most manufacturers, if not all of them, have issued a service bulletin at some point, probably it's been quite a few years now, saying don't put rubber bands on your harness. It's just going to save you money not doing that. You can buy, Sunshine Factory has these, the Rigging Loft has them, elastic keepers. Yeah. And then I'm going to put Stubbs' pilot chute back here.
I actually have a quick question while you have the pilot chute out. How can you tell when your pilot chute's worn out?
So one thing is you can look, your owner's manual has a lot of times expected life expectancies for their components. Some people, you're going to hear someone say when you ask that question, try to breathe through it. That's not always accurate because now a lot of pilot chutes are F111. So if it's a ZP pilot chute and you can breathe through it, it's worn out. But if it's an F111 pilot chute, you're going to be able to breathe through it. It's they just usually are a larger size. So some of it is just looking at the expected life expectancy of your particular component that you're using. The other thing is if you start to get weird openings and you know your pilot chute's got a couple hundred jumps on it, suspect that it could be your pilot chute, because when this gets weak, your openings get less consistent, because this is what starts your deployment, and if it's pulling consistently, that's a good steady extraction of the parachute. If this pilot chute's getting really old and it's kind of bouncing around in your burble, there's more chances that you're going to get weird openings, because instead of going straight out, your bag is bouncing around too then. So it's hard to say like exactly, but another thing you can do, which is the easiest answer, is ask me or Pete, ask a rigger, we'll take a look at your pilot chute and tell you like, yeah, it's fine, no it's not, but a lot of it is knowing how many jumps on it. I mean, if you're like, I have 800 jumps on my pilot chute, I think it might be worn out. Yes, it probably is worn out.
Because the pilot chute, its job isn't just to pop the piston.
No, it's extracting.
It needs to fly the D-bag all the way
Yes,
through.
it's extracting everything all the way around. So if it's not working right, it's not going to do that. You might get more line twists, you might get just weird openings, you might get hesitation. So definitely remember that those wear out. The other thing I want to talk to you guys about is something I think everyone here knows about, because I'm pretty sure we cover it a lot when we do your A licenses, is clean your cutaway cables and three-ring system maintenance. Everybody knows we should do it, but a lot of us don't do it very regularly, especially here in Florida. It's sandy, it's dusty, it's dirty. You want to clean your cutaway cables probably every 30 days. If you don't know how, we always have silicone on the packing mat. We're happy to help you. But what you want to use is basically this. They have it at Shooting Star. You can get it at, sometimes it's used on wetsuits a lot, so sometimes dive shops will have it, just silicone spray. This rig is a good example to use to show you guys how to do this, because it has a sky hook, and with the sky hook there is a Collins lanyard, which is this yellow lanyard, and a split in the hard housing. So if you didn't have a sky hook rig, like you had a wings or a rig that doesn't have this housing that's right here would be one continuous piece. It's the long side cutaway cable on your handle. On the skyhook, it has a split to allow this yellow lanyard to hook up. And the reason that's there is if you were to have, on a skyhook rig, your RSL side riser break, this will make sure that you are cut away before your reserve comes out. This is going to pull the cutaway. Whereas otherwise, now that riser leaves, your other riser's still hooked up, your RSL thinks your parachute is gone, it would pull it out into the other side still connected, and you might have a main reserve entanglement. This Collins lanyard is supposed to make it much reduced chances of that happening, but when we clean this cutaway cable, we got to make sure we go through the lanyard and through the housing. It's not going to work. So, you can see, the channel's not too dirty, but you can see there's this black stuff, gunk that gets on these cables. It's just dirt from skydiving and being around the airplane. The best way to clean it, I'm doing it with the main still in the container because these magnetic riser covers are holding the risers in place, so nothing's going to get twisted up while I'm doing this. But you want to take this silicone spray it on the paper towel, because trying to spray it on a cable is very messy. And you want to take the part that you just sprayed. You can see all the black stuff's going to come off. And then once you clean it, you want to take a dry part of the paper towel and wipe the extra silicone off, because if you don't wipe that extra silicone off, it tends to get sticky and it will collect more dirt. So you definitely want to wipe that off. And then we're going to put this back together. I'm sure most of you know your cutaway has a short side and a long side. The short side is going to be pretty easy. Make sure when you're putting this back, you get that hook Velcro on your handle all the way covered up and it's not on your harness. If you just shove this in here without paying attention, you may end up with the Velcro wearing on your harness. So pay attention when you're putting this back, get it all the way seated. Then I'm going to put the cable back. The short side is super easy. Side is going to be the long side that has to go through that split housing if you have a skyhook. If you're not sure, we're happy to help you, or you can look in your manual. you can see, right now, I'm going to start shoving this long cable through. You can see if I don't reach in here and grab it, it's just going to keep going like down in here into the reserve, or not where it's supposed to go. So now, we want to go pull all this cable up just so we have it out of the way. We want to go through this yellow lanyard, and only the yellow lanyard on the Collins lanyard. Some older Collins lanyards have this yellow loop and then a black piece. This is the newer style where they took the black loop away, but you only want to go through this yellow loop. Then we're going to go through this other side of the housing. Now we have both of our cables where we can hook everything back up. But before we assemble our 3 rings, you want to take your 3 ring and just flex this memory out, because these things tend to stay hooked up pretty much all the time unless you have a malfunction or you're changing canopies or something like that. And they can get this memory where they just stay in the hooked up shape. So you want to take it, flex it, get the memory out, hook the 3 ring back up. And again, if any of you ever want to clean your cables and you're not sure how, stop by the packing mat. Ideally when we're not super busy, but we have silicone, we're happy to help you do it. And this is a good time to look at your risers too, because if you get anything like a nick in these rings, it can start wearing the soft parts of your risers. So this is a good time. Just look at everything. Make sure you don't see any frayed parts, any scratches in the metal, anything like that. Because your risers are another part of your rig that you may have to replace at some point. They may wear out faster than your container depending on how much you jump.
How do you know when it's time to change risers?
So if you're noticing, a lot of wear that I notice on risers is either they get really sun faded because they're on your rig a long time, or if you pull your slider down and it's sitting behind your head, like especially, it can start to wear right there. But yeah, I would say watch out for the sun damage, watch out for wear from your slider, stuff like that. The other thing that you may want to change is if you have soft links, I was always taught change them at least every second line set. Like, don't reuse the same soft links forever. Those are another part that the slider comes down your lines and there's a lot of friction, so your slider grommets get very hot and they tend to come down and sit on those soft links, so over time those wear out. Just replace them when you change your line set. That is much better than having something like that fail. Same thing with your lines. Lines are something that it's going to depend what type of line you have and what type of canopy, exactly how many jumps you're going to get out of your line set. If you fly a very high performance swoop canopy, you might only get 200 jumps on a line set because you have very tiny lines and the canopy is putting a lot of force on the whole system. But most of you, it's probably going to be somewhere between 500 to 700 jumps on a line set, depending on your line type. If you have HMA lines, you really want to keep track of your jump numbers, because HMA lines stay in trim, so your canopy will fly very well, but it doesn't show wear. So your lines, they won't look worn out. It'll be hard to tell if you don't know how many jumps on them, how worn out they are. Vectran lines and Spectra lines is a little bit more easy to see the wear. Spectra, you'll be able to see that your canopy will go out of trim. So definitely keep track of your jump numbers on your components. I know that's the kind of thing that we say and we don't do because none of us log things probably as well as we should, but it will help you to change your components rather than waiting for them to break on a skydive and then having to change them. Let's see. Do you guys have any questions about gear that you want to ask? before, so spandex has gotten better over the years. And so now a lot of jumpers are not very diligent about doing that. Like that was a more common practice when I started skydiving. But I would say, definitely if you're leaving your rig for months, I would say it's not gonna hurt to take it out, right? It's super easy to fold your pilot chute, it takes less than 30 seconds. It's not gonna hurt it. So definitely if you're going more than a month, because if you're going 6 months, you really should unpack your whole rig and rig roll. Because if you leave it stored packed up like this for months at a time, the canopy gets the memory of being packed. Whereas when we take everything apart and we store it, rigger rolled, it has the memory like it's in flight instead of having all those folds. So the same thing goes for your pilot chute. If you're leaving it for months, you probably want to take it out. It's just gonna, there's no real reason not to. But if you're leaving it, during the week and you're going jumping on the weekend, I really wouldn't worry about it. Anybody else have gear questions? Good. All right, I think we're all set. And if anybody has their rig here and wants to clean their cutaway cables,
Do it.
I will happily help you clean your cutaway cables.
Cutaway cable party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shelly. Thank you, guys.